We're in this wild new era where we're asking machines to make actual life or death decisions. Seriously, from self-driving cars to medical diagnoses, we're outsourcing choices that have always been uniquely human. And that brings up a massive question. If a machine has to make one of those impossible choices, who wrote the rules it's following? Okay, let's get into it. To really get our heads around this, let's start with a story that's about as human as it gets. Picture a doctor, a nephrologist, and his job is to decide who gets a life-saving kidney. There's only one organ, but there are a whole lot of people who desperately need it. I mean, this is the ultimate ethical dilemma, right? A choice with no easy answer where every single option carries this enormous, life-altering weight. For decades, we've had systems for this. We've built committees, guidelines, entire ethical frameworks, all to make sure these impossible choices aren't just left to one person's gut feeling. But now, as we lean more and more on AI, that entire thoughtful human structure is being challenged. And in some cases, it's being tossed out completely. And the difference here is just stark. Look, in the medical world, that doctor wouldn't be making the call alone. Not a chance. They'd have an ethics committee, a whole team of doctors, lawyers, ethicists, all guided by principles we've argued about for years. But in the world of AI, well, that whole group discussion often gets replaced by a single engineer, coding their own personal judgment of right and wrong into an algorithm that could affect millions. So, realizing this is a huge problem, governments all over the world are now scrambling to write the official rulebooks for AI. But as you can probably guess, they don't exactly agree on what those rules should be. And here's where you can really see that global divide in action. You've got three major powers, and they're all building AI ethics based on their own unique values. In China, the priority is social harmony and stability. In the US, it's all about individual liberty and innovation. And over in the EU, the whole framework is built on a foundation of human rights. These completely different starting points are creating wildly different rule books, and it's fueling this global tech race where the very definition of what makes an AI good is totally up for grabs. So how do you even get from some big philosophical idea to an actual national law? Well, it basically boils down to a three-step process. First, you take these broad ethical theories and pull out some core principles. Then, step two, local culture and values shape how those principles actually get applied. And finally, politics and economics come in to decide that final balance between, letting innovation run wild versus putting some serious controls in place. All right, so let's take all this theory and see where the rubber, quite literally, meets the road. Because nowhere do these abstract rules get more real and more terrifyingly immediate than inside the code of a self-driving car. And this brings us right to a high-tech version of the classic trolley problem. You probably heard of it, right? It's that thought experiment where a crash is about to happen and you have to make a choice between two terrible outcomes. Does the car swerve to save a group of people but sacrifice its passenger? Or does it protect its passenger no matter what? The thing is, for a self-driving car, this isn't just a theory. The answer has to be written into the code. Okay, I know what you might be thinking. Come on, this is just a philosophical puzzle, something you'd argue about in a classroom. But it's not. This theory has already been tested in the real world, and the results were fatal. Let's walk through the final moments before the first ever fatal accident involving a self-driving car and a pedestrian. With 5.6 seconds to go, the system sees something, but it's confused. A few seconds later, it thinks it's a bicycle. Then it changes its mind back to other. An actual warning alert doesn't even sound until there's just 0.2 seconds left. By the time the human backup driver desperately grabs the wheel, it is way, way too late. So how did it fail so catastrophically? Well, it wasn't just one mistake. It was a whole cascade of deliberate choices. First off, Uber had disabled the car's built-in emergency braking system. Second, their own system was programmed with a 1-second delay to avoid annoying false alarms. And this is critical. It was designed to only slam on the brakes if it was sure it could completely avoid a crash. Otherwise, it would just kind of slow down. And through that entire fatal sequence, the AI never once identified the victim, Elaine Herzberg, as a human being. And while a tragic crash like this is what grabs the headlines, the decisions that led to it point to a much bigger problem. You see, the whole debate over AI ethics gets so focused on these split-second trolley problems, but when we do that, we end up missing these other enormous hidden costs. For instance, what about the social cost? AI doesn't just magically learn. It's trained by people, millions of hours of tedious human labor. A lot of this click work, just endlessly labeling images, is done by workers in developing countries for as little as $1.50 an hour. These are the invisible ghost workers who are powering our so-called intelligent machines. And then there's the environmental cost, which is honestly staggering. We think of AI as this clean digital thing that just exists in the cloud. But training just one complex AI model takes a massive amount of computing power. In fact, one study found it can create a carbon footprint equal to the entire lifetime emissions of 5 cars. This is a huge physical impact that our ethical rulebooks almost never even mention. And the list of what our rulebooks are missing just keeps going. I mean, think about the shocking lack of diversity. When 80% of university AI professors are men, you're going to get human biases baked right into the system from day one. Or what about the mountains of toxic e-waste from a tech industry that's always upgrading hardware? And maybe worst of all, even when we do write ethical guidelines, they're often so vague and abstract that an engineer has no idea how to actually translate them into code. But maybe the biggest challenge of all isn't really about the technology. Maybe it's about us. It's about confronting our own deeply conflicting and frankly paradoxical ideas about what we actually want these machines to do. And this right here is the great paradox. It's a real head-scratcher. Studies show that most of us agree on a simple utilitarian principle. Self-driving cars should be programmed to save the most lives possible, even if that means sacrificing their passenger. We want other people's cars to be ethical heroes. But then, when you ask what kind of car we would buy, the answer completely flips. We want the car that will protect us and our families at any cost. So all of this brings us right back to the beginning. But now the question is personal. An accident is coming, it's unavoidable. Your car has to make a choice. Who does it protect? And maybe the more important question is this. In a world that's going to be run by algorithms, who do you really trust to write the code that makes that decision for you?